Hi, my name is Jason Robinette, and I'm here to teach you the Ophidian Card Game. Ophidian is a gladiator combat game set in the future, where each player brings a team of gladiators to the table. Those gladiators start at level 1, which is indicated in the upper left corner, and you're going to bring a team of up to 4 gladiators. The gladiators have a victory point total, here on the left. The total must equal exactly 10 points. You could bring 3 gladiators, for example, but you'll probably want to start with 4 because it'll give you the most options. Going over the rest of the cards, the gladiators have a discipline symbol or 2 in the upper left corner here. That indicates their areas of specialty, what they bring to your team. They're also going to help determine how you're going to build your deck. If you're lucky enough to have one of these beautiful playmats, you'll see on the right over here there is a list of all of the available disciplines in the game. Moving down on the left, you'll see there is a life total. That's how many wounds a gladiator can take until they're defeated, granting your opponent the victory points for that gladiator. Beneath that we have rage, which I'll cover later in the demo. And we have the attack damage, which is how much damage they deal when they're attacking. On the right, there are some keywords. In this case, for gladiators, we have things like demon, spectral, human, things like that. Some cards, when you play them, will refer to cards by keywords rather than by card titles. You're also going to have some reinforcement gladiators and higher level gladiator cards, which will be in your gladiator stack, but we'll get to those when that is appropriate. In your deck, you're going to have basically 3 types of cards. There is a 4th type called zones, but we're not going to cover that in this demo. The first card type is a quick hit. A quick hit is a card that has its effect, and then it goes away, and you can discard it. The second card type is a pump. A pump is a card that plays on another card. In this case, this is a pump gladiator, so it would play on a gladiator. And those cards may either have constant effects where they're modifying the card they're on, or they might have their own abilities where they can use those for different effects. The third card type is a minion. Now a minion is similar to a gladiator in that minions and gladiators are both considered characters. Minions also have a life total, they have an attack damage, but they don't have a rage value, and there are other things that minions cannot do that are exclusive to gladiators. Now, in order to play these cards, that's where the disciplines are going to come in. In order to play Kalim's Momentum, for example, you're going to need to have a level 1 Mystic Gladiator on your team. In this case, we happen to have 2 on this team, so this card could be played deck. If you look at the other team, Freak Show is also a level 1 Mystic Gladiator, So this card could also be played in that deck. In order to play this peptide growth hormone, you're going to need to have a level 2 biotech or biogen gladiator. And we don't have any on this team, but they will be able to level up later in the game. So you will be able to play that in this deck. In order to play the cards that play from your hand, also called strategy cards, there's a play cost, which is marked on the left here with a P. That play cost is using credit points, which we'll keep track of on the playmat here on the left. And you're going to have a certain amount of those every wave in the game that you'll use to play cards. Those credit points are use it or lose it. They last for the wave that you use them, and if you don't use all of them, they're going to go away when your credit points reset during what's called a breather, which we'll cover later. And the game is played over a series of 4 waves. At the end of the 4th wave, the player who has scored the most victory points is the winner. And again, the victory points currently are scored by defeating gladiators. If Little Jinx were defeated, I would place Little Jinx into my funeral pyre, and her 2 victory points would count towards my opponent's total. That is, in fact, the primary way to win the game. Most games are going to resolve at the end of the 4th wave by victory points. If there is a tie at the end of the 4th wave, you will play a tiebreaker wave and additional tiebreaker waves as needed. An additional way to win the game is just wiping out your opponent's gladiators or scoring a total of 12 victory points. To begin the game, we're going to go ahead and set up our gladiators, set our gladiator stack with higher level gladiators and reinforcements, set up our credit points, and set up our decks and our hands. So when you set up your credit points, every wave you receive 10 credit points plus the number of the next wave. Since the game has not yet begun, we're going to be going into the first wave, so we're going to start with 11 credit points. After the first breather, you'll be going into the second wave, so that would be 12 credit points. When you're setting up your hand, you're going to draw to your maximum hand size plus 2 additional cards. The maximum hand size is a default of 7 cards, so you're going to draw 7 cards plus 2 additional cards. You'll take a look at your hand, decide which 2 cards you're not going to want to play this wave or are not going to be able to use. We typically recommend that you go ahead and take anything that is higher than a level 1 card and place those on the bottom of your deck, because you're not going to be able to play those in the first wave anyway. Every time you refill your hand during a breather or at the beginning of the game, you're always going to be drawing your maximum hand size plus 2 additional cards, then taking those any two additional cards and placing them on the bottom of your deck. Now that you have your hands, you're both going to roll a die, and whoever's going to go first is going to have the flow or momentum. And that is one of the features of this game that makes it very unique. It's not a turn-based game. It uses the flow or momentum to allow a player to put together strings of combinations until their opponent can either disrupt those combinations, or you take an action that is not inherently aggressive or interactive, and that's going to pass the momentum over to your opponent. The actions that you can take involve the cards in play and the cards in your hand. Now, there are 2 fields here, an action field and a support field. You can move between the fields by retreating, which if you're unset will set you, or advancing. You're not going to be able to advance if you're set. advancing, because that's moving into a position that's more aggressive, is a positive action, which means I could continue to do things. So if I were to advance Ryla, I could advance Little Jinx, I could advance Pockshot. You could also attack from the action field. So again, I could continue to do actions. Positive action attacking, a positive action attacking, until I take a negative action, like retreating. That would pass the momentum over to my opponent. We'd still remain in the same wave, where my opponent will take positive actions until they take a negative action. The wave continues until both players consecutively pass. If you decide to pass and your opponent still takes actions and then the momentum passes back to you, you can continue to take actions. You're not locked out. It's when there's 2 consecutive passes, that's when we move into the breather. And that's typically when most of your cards are set, or you're out of credit points and you just don't really have anything you want to do or even are able to do. The cards in your hand, as I mentioned, are also part of those actions that you can take. So if you look at Dripping Leak, that's a positive action. The momentum or flow symbol is in the upper left corner. Playing this card would allow you to keep the momentum and keep playing cards and performing actions. If you wanted to play a minion, like Rancheck for example, minions come into play into the support field, and Rancheck is marked as a negative, which means it's a negative action. So the momentum is going to move over to your opponent, where they can take positive actions until they take a negative action. There are some cards that are considered undetermined or variable. There's a question mark where their momentum symbol is, and the text of that card will determine whether or not it's a positive or a negative action. In this case, it's based on a random result, a die roll. Some of the results are positive, so you get to keep going, and some of the results are negative. So the flow or momentum would pass to your opponent. There are a few additional momentum symbols in the game. There are R and also OR and DR, which are all in the category of responses. Responses are cards that are not part of the momentum system, so they can be played at any time it's appropriate, and the game text of those cards will tell you when it's appropriate. By default, Rs can usually be played almost any time. ORs are typically played when you have the momentum. It's an offensive response. And DRs, or defensive responses, are played when you don't have the momentum. Almost every situation will be very clear based on the text of the card, which will tell you when you're able to play that response. Now let's cover combat. This is a combat-based game after all. So I'm going to go ahead and have Auxilipool be my example attacker, and I'm going to set up my opponent's field to show a few examples of how those attacks work. When you set up the game initially, you can put your gladiators in whatever fields you'd like. You're setting your formation to begin the game. When you're learning the game, we recommend 2 up and 2 back of your choice, usually stronger guys in front because they can take a little more damage, and the weaker guys in the back. But again, you could start with everyone in the back, everyone in the front, 3 up, 1 back, any way you'd like. So if this were the situation, and I had Auxilipool attacking, you set to attack and you choose your target. Now, you must be in the action field to attack, but you can attack targets anywhere, in any field. Where they are will also dictate the options that your opponent has. So, if Auxilipool, who does an attack damage of 2, were to attack Opaque Sentier, Barring special actions from cards in hand or responses, that a player is going to have basically one option, which is to take the damage. So I will grab a die, place 2 damage on Opaque Sentier, and that's a positive action, so I can continue to do other things. I could advance Pockshot as a positive action, I could then attack the same target, a different target, and so forth. Now, if Freak Show were up in the same field, and by the way, the placement in that field is not relevant to the cards in front or back, just you're either in one field or the other. If Auxilipool were going to attack Opaque Sentier in the same situation there, but Freak Show were in the same field, it gives the player another option. He has the same initial option as before, take the damage, or an unset gladiator in the same field can set to intercept that attack. An intercept is jumping in the way of the attack, they become the target of the attack, they take the damage in their place. If Auxilipool decided to go after Striking Dragon in the back, the same 2 options as before exist, the first being take the damage, the second being intercepting with an unset gladiator in the same field, Tara takes the damage, or a third option, an unset gladiator in the action field can protect a target in the back in the support field. It's similar to intercepting in that they become the target, they take the damage. If Opaque Sentier wanted to do it, he could do it, or Freak Show could do it. And the difference is it does not cause them to set, so subsequent attacks against targets in the support field could also be protected. They're still available to take an action later in the turn because they're unset. So that's the main difference between protecting and intercepting. Now, this is a crowd-based game. It's a spectator sport, and people came in to see gladiators fighting. And that's what they paid to see, and that's what they want to see. So, when gladiators attack, exciting things happen and the crowd cheer. And that's going to use our cheer mechanic. So, going back to our previous examples, when Auxilipool attacks Opaque Sentier and Opaque Sentier takes the damage, I'm also going to gain 1 cheer. If Opaque were still the same target and Freak Show were in the same field and he decides to intercept, well, that was surprising and exciting. And because of that, the crowd really likes to see those sacrifices, those acts of nobility. And not only will he become the target and take the damage, but he's also going to take that cheer, and that cheer is going to be scored by that player instead of me. So, giving the crowd what they want can be really advantageous. If Auxilipool were going to attack Striking Dragon in the back, and again, take the damage, I would gain the cheer. Tara intercepts, the other player would gain the cheer. Or if there was a protect, then I would still gain the cheer, because if an attack is happening on someone in the support field and there are available protectors in the action field, it's not that surprising. And so the cheer would still go to the attacker in that instance. Now, cheer is used in 3 ways in the game. The primary or first way is that it is an alternate victory condition. If you're able to achieve a total of 15 cheer at any point in the game, you have excited the crowd to such a point where they riot and rush the field and tear your opponents to pieces. So 15 cheer equals an immediate victory, regardless of the gameplay situation on the table. So if you had more wounds or had lost more gladiators, but you're still able to achieve 15 cheer, that is an instant win. The second use is that it is considered a way to keep track of who the crowd favorite is at any point in the game. So if you have more cheer than any other player in the game, you are considered to be the crowd favorite. There are certain cards that have a thumbs up symbol on them, and that thumbs up symbol indicates you must be the crowd favorite in order to use that ability. Certain abilities will also say do 2 of something, or if thumbs up, do 3. So if you're the crowd favorite, that card will become slightly more effective. The third use of cheer is really the most important use of cheer, and that is where you are able to basically bank the popularity with the crowd and those positive actions as a resource that you can spend. If you want to spend a cheer, you can do so anytime your opponent takes a positive action to convert that action into a negative action. It does not change the action in any other way. It doesn't prevent it, but it just says that when that action resolves, you're going to be getting the momentum passing over to you. So in the example where Auxilipool attacked Opaque Sentier, if Freak Show intercepts, that cheer is granted immediately. That cheer could still be spent because the attack action has not fully resolved, and that would make this attack a negative action. The momentum would pass to that player. So not only is intercepting a great way to protect other characters from taking damage, but it's also a way to steal the momentum from your opponent and disrupt combinations. I'm going to go ahead and reset the field a little bit here. Let's talk about what happens when a gladiator takes enough damage to become enraged. Every gladiator has a value on them which indicates the point at which they become enraged. In Little Jinx's example here, she has a rage value of 4. So when she has 4 or more wounds on her, she's considered to be enraged or raging. And you can use a token like this to just remind you that that's a raging character. And it's a good reminder for you, and also for your opponent, but mostly for you because having raging gladiators grants them some additional abilities. Not all of them are good, but it's still important to remember. A raging gladiator refuses to retreat, so you cannot retreat a raging gladiator. If you have a card that allows you to retreat a character, you can use that card on a raging gladiator because the gladiator is not doing the retreating, the action is doing the retreating, so that's fine. But they will not take the default action of retreating. The second use of raging is when an attack happens against a raging gladiator. A default damage of 1 rage damage will be placed on the attacker. Now, if an attack happens and someone intercepts, then that rage damage is never going to happen. If I were to intercept with a raging character, again, that is not going to trigger it. It's only when they are the original target and the final target of the attack that damage is done. If Little Jinx here were set and raging, and Opaque Sentier wanted to attack, that's fine. She's not going to be able to do her 1 rage damage back, but instead, in response to being attacked, and that attack is not intercepted or protected, she can unset. So it's actually a little bit more dangerous, especially when you have gladiators with lots of weapons on them or a high attack damage value. Finishing them off can be very difficult because they can continue to unset and then attack you and hit you for lots of damage. So it takes a little bit of skill and coordination to try to finish someone off without receiving a lot of damage in return. Now, let's say we've played the game and let's say everyone is set. There's some minion in play and let's put a pump on Freak Show. I put a dripping leak on him which causes him to take some damage. And let's throw a little bit of damage on our characters to show that the game has progressed a little bit. Now let's step into the breather. Once both players consecutively pass, we enter the breather. If you're fortunate enough to have one of these beautiful playmats, the steps of the breather are outlined here. The first step is to determine flow or momentum. That's where we check the status of the game and see how things are going. You're going to count up the wounds on each of your gladiators, not on minions, just gladiators, so this damage on Ranchak is not going to count. So I have a total of 10 wounds on my gladiators. My opponent only has 6, so I'm not doing so well. I haven't been able to inflict as much damage, so my opponent has the advantage. So I'm going to begin the next wave with momentum. The next step is regenerate, and we're going to regenerate 3 things. The first is every card we have in play is going to reset, so let's do that. The second thing we're going to do is reset our credit points. So all the current credit points you have are wiped clean, and then we set it to 10 plus the number of the next wave. So if we're going to be moving into the second wave, I start the next wave with 12. So my opponent will also get 12. And then we regenerate our hands. You're going to take any cards you don't want or can't use and discard them. Let's say I want to get rid of these cards. cards. And then you're going to refill your hand back to its maximum hand size, plus 2. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards in my hand, so I will draw 1, 2 more, and the extra 2. Take a look through my hand and decide which 2 cards I don't need right now and place them on the bottom of my deck. Now you will be leveling someone up this breather, so keeping level 2 cards is not a bad thing. That's also going to help you decide who you might want to level up. Once we've done that, we're going to move into the maintain step. That's where we pay to keep cards in play. You're going to look at all of the cards that have a maintain cost, which is minions and pumps. And they have a maintain cost, which is an M here, right next to their play cost. So to keep these Rancheks in play, I have to pay 1 for each of them. Since he has a wound on him, I'm not going to keep him, so I'm going to let him go. But I will pay for this one, so I'll reduce my credit points by 1. And I also played this Dripping Leak on Freak Show to deal damage to him, so that has a maintenance cost of 1, and I want to keep that, so I'm going to go down to 10. Once we've all paid our maintain costs on cards, we move to promote. Now you're going to get to choose one of your gladiators and raise them up to the next level. So looking at my hand, I do have a level 2 card that is a mystic card, so it's probably a good idea for me to raise up one of my 2 mystics. And because Auxilipool is my main guy, I'm going to go ahead and raise him up. So you take the card, you flip it over to the next level, and a fringe benefit of being promoted is you do get to heal 1 wound, so he'll also heal. In subsequent waves, if I wanted to level up Auxilipool again, what I'll do is move the die aside, take the level 2 card, place it in my gladiator stack, and find the level 3 version of Auxilipool, and put that out, and then heal the wound. And certain cards that have the extra level cards can go from level 3 to level 4 as well. During the promote step, you can also bring in reinforcement gladiators. Now, as we said, you can start with up to 4 gladiators, and the number that you start with is the total number of gladiators you can have for the entire game. So if Pockshot had bit the dust and it's in my funeral pyre, I'm down 1 gladiator. So I can go into my reinforcements and pull out a reinforcement gladiator. In this case, I could bring in Gene Splice. If I had lost 2 gladiators, I could also bring in another reinforcement gladiator if I wanted to. Now, you don't automatically want to bring these out necessarily because they have some downsides. The first is they have a maintain cost. Now, fortunately, we've already moved into the promote step, so you're not going to have to pay the maintain cost the turn they come out. It would be for subsequent maintain phases. They also have a very low life total, and they don't have as much damage as other gladiators typically. They also have a 0 level. Now, that means they're not going to be able to play cards by themselves, but when you play a card that has the additional requirement, they can still satisfy that additional requirement because that level is ignored. It can be as low as a level 0, so they can satisfy those extra requirements. The good thing about reinforcement gladiators is they are gladiators. So they are still better than minions in that they can protect, they can intercept, and they do generate cheer when they attack. Let's go ahead and talk about the last step, which is maneuver. Now, maneuver is where you're setting a new formation for the next wave. Now, because I'm beginning the next wave with the momentum, I would do that first, so you can rearrange your field however you'd like. And once you've done that, your opponents can do the same, and then the next wave begins. Now, because you're setting a formation and you're not actually moving the cards as far as retreating or advancing, if Little Jinx, for example, were enraged, you normally couldn't retreat her, but you can set her in the back because it's setting a new formation, it's not retreating or advancing. Play continues, and again, you're going to play this over a series of 4 waves. At the end of the 4th wave, a victor will be determined, and that's the game. Thanks so much for watching.